Welcome back to the show this week. I think this week's guest is going to leave you wanting to be a better human when you get through listening to this. I know the first time I heard him, it was one of the first thoughts I had was, I want to be better myself. Our guest today is one Howard Behar. For 21 years, he led Starbucks domestic business as president of North America and became the founding president of Starbucks International, opening the very first store outside of North America in Japan. During his tenure, he participated in the growth of a company from 28 stores to over 15,000. 28 to 15,000. 300 employees to 750,000 employees. He served on the Starbucks board of directors for 12 years before retiring. He's written 2 books, both of which I've read. It's Not About the Coffee, Lessons on Leadership from a Life at Starbucks, and The Magic Cup, a magical story about a leader, a team, and putting people and values first. They are both phenomenal. So I would, say you need to get those right off the bat. But welcome and thank you for joining us, Howard.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited. I've got me a notebook. Like, I'm ready to take notes myself, So this is my first question. A lot of times our identity as, what we think about ourselves and who we are early on is shaped by the people that raise us, good, bad, or indifferent. So I guess my first question is, childhood, growing up, what did you catch? What did you learn? What was your identity as it relates to your parents? What did you learn from them?
Well, both of my parents were immigrants to the United States in the early 1900s. My father was actually born in 1895, left his family as a 15-year-old and never saw him again. He was from Bulgaria, and he had to make his way in the world. Can you imagine our 15-year-old kids doing that? Can't. Those were the days, those were the times. And so he ended up in Seattle, and my mother ended up in Seattle a number of years later, and they ended up meeting in Seattle and getting married. And my dad worked at a place called the Pike Place Market, which at the year that it opened, 1911. And it was a farmer's market. Now it's a tourist destination, still somewhat of a farmer's market, but mostly a tourist destination. And he pushed a cart, pushing vegetables around. And that's how he earned money, and he saved his pennies, nickels, and dimes. And he ended up opening a small mom and pop grocery store in the north end of Seattle. And that's where I grew up, was around that grocery store. He was 50 when I was born, and he retired when he was 62. So by the time I was 12, by the time he sold the store. And anyway, and I watched him get up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, go down to Produce Row, pick up his produce and his fruit, and bring it back to the store, clean it all up, get it ready to open when he opened his store at 8 o'clock. And I watched him do that every day of the week except for Sunday. In those days, you weren't open, on Sundays.
Sure.
And you were closed down at 6 o'clock at night. And he would come home and he would eat his dinner as fast as any human being could possibly eat his dinner. I used to remember, I was amazed. You could not keep up with him. He would just shovel it in, and he was done, and he went to his chair and he fell asleep because he was tired.
Sure.
He was a hard worker, and he did that forever. And so I watched that. I watched both my parents work really hard. And of course, they told me the lessons about the Depression. I wasn't born yet, but the lessons about the Depression, and that certainly stuck with me. They don't let you forget how difficult it was. And I watched my dad and how he treated the people that he served, those human beings we call customers. And a story that I remember from the time I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was up by the front counter. My dad was ringing up a customer. These were in the days when it was a hand crank
Sure.
there was no electronic cash register. It was put the numbers in, pull the crank, and it would go bing, like that.
Right.
So my dad, as I was standing, my dad said, "Howard, go get me some strawberries or bananas." I can't remember which now, and fresh fruit. And so I went back and I got a couple of baskets of strawberries or a bunch of bananas, and my dad put them in the customer's bag, and the customer walked out. And I was old enough to recognize my father hadn't rung those up on the cash register. And I said, "Dad, you forgot to ring those up on the cash register." And he said, "Not." And he looked at me and said, "Howard, not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for." And I happen to know that these people are struggling right now. And they're not just our customers, but they're our friends and our neighbors. And I'm just trying to help them out. Now, I didn't realize the importance of that, too much later on in life, but it has served me well. It's true. Not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for. We don't need a trophy for everything we do in life. Sometimes we just need to be part of life and help others get the trophy. And that's the lesson I took with me. As a matter of fact, it's how I got to Starbucks. Before I went to, it was a long journey of talking with Howard Schultz, who was kind of the modern day founder of Starbucks. And I said before I went to work, this is Howard, can I work in the company for a week? I'll work for free. And I said, you look at me, I'll look at you. And so I did that. And I worked in the trucks for a couple of days, in the stores for a few days. And I worked in a roasting plant for a few days. And at the end of the week, fortunately, he extended an offer for me to join. And I was excited about doing it. And that's how I got to Starbucks.
Wow.
Didn't need to get paid for it. I just did it. And, that worked out.
Sure. Funny thing, my first head coaching job was at a small school in central Mississippi. And when I went in for the interview, having never been a head coach, I knew the cards were stacked against me. And the last thing I told them before I walked out was, look, if you'll give me this job, I'll do it for free for a year. And if you don't like it, run me off. If you do like me, start paying me. And I was sincere. Like, I would have taken out a loan. Like, I was ready. I wanted it. I would do anything to get it. And, that's funny that you said that. And what else is, what you learned at a very early age, like seeing your dad put that fruit in there, I know, made a huge impression, because the fact that you bring that up today, but also in knowing what your role was in Starbucks and how Starbucks grew. I know that was very instrumental in that. All right, let me ask you this question. Post high school, when you get out and go to work, professional career kind of summed up before Starbucks.
Well, I grew up my father retired, but I had a brother and a brother-in-law that both had furniture stores. And so from the time I was 13, I was working in those furniture stores, dusting furniture, working on the trucks, helping to deliver furniture. And so I kind of grew up in that, from the time I was 13 till time I was in my early 20s. And then I ended up going to work for a guy in Salem, Oregon. I was 21 years old, and he was looking for a store manager. And I had not a lot of experience, but enough experience in the furniture business by that time to where I felt I could manage a store. Unfortunately, I had confidence in me. So I did that for a few years. And then I was recruited by a company called Levitt's Furniture, which was a big box furniture retailer. And so I worked for them for about 5 years. And then I ended up being recruited by a company called Federated Department Stores and a startup called Gold Key, again, furniture. And then I got mouthy with my boss one day. He used to come in every day and he'd say, Howard, he'd say, how you doing, dummy? And it used to make me mad. I didn't want to be called a dummy.
Right.
And one day I got up and I said, don't ever say that to me again. 3 weeks later, I was fired, out looking for a job, And my wife was a few months away from giving birth to our baby, and our first baby. And I had to figure something out really quick. And I ended up going to work for a company called Grand Tree Furniture Rental out of Portland, Oregon. And it's where I got my first real opportunity to really have a senior position in a company. And so I basically spent 25 years in the home furnishings industry.
Wow.
And the company got sold, and I ended up going to work for the guy that was the CEO of the company. And we were in the consumer land development business. And that company got in trouble, and we had to sell it. But I had the opportunity to be president for the last 2 years before we sold it. So to have an opportunity to be president of a company that was a small public company without a college degree, which I didn't have, was a big deal. And so, it taught me a lot. I got my MBA working in that company, working 18 hours a day, watching where all the dollars and cents went, and, having to manage it. Anyway, that company also got in trouble, and we had to sell it. And that's when I met Howard Schultz. So, but I'd spent my whole career basically in consumer related products or services. I knew it and I liked it.
Sure. Let me ask you this. I ran across this statement a guy made last week, and tell me, what made me think about this was, the your boss, saying, dummy or whatever.
Yeah.
What about this statement? A culture of achievement will always trump a culture of intimidation.
No question about it.
You know,
No question. There's no question. A culture of helping people to be better, to be better human beings, to be better professionals, and to achieve their own personal goals will help a company grow versus the opposite way around. And you can see those examples everywhere you go. Look at Microsoft was a company of intimidation for a long time under Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, and their stock didn't move. I mean, they did really well at the beginning, but it was an intimidation oriented company. And finally, it wasn't doing so well, and they changed the CEO, and the CEO was a CEO that said empathy is the most important skill any leader needs to have. And the company turns around, becomes a people-centric company. Uber was led by an autocratic leader. And of course, you know what happened there. They had to make a change, and it wasn't doing well, losing a lot of money. And new guy comes in and he changes the how people are being treated, and becomes a company of achievement. There's no question. I mean, Warren Buffett says it perfectly. He says he said culture will beat strategy any day of the week.
No doubt about it. And that's in my profession, in coaching in particular, you see it more prevalent, like there's a lot of yellers, there's a lot of screamers, there's a lot of intimidation, but there's also the folks out there that are very very much culture related, and you can tell the difference. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the great examples right now that we have, is Deion Sanders. Like Deion Sanders is creating a culture that is all about the players, and it's about helping them be better humans. And, he's reaping the benefits of that, no matter what people think.
Yeah.
All right, next question. And this is, Starbucks was known kind of, for their culture, like that culture, has been a buzzword. Let's say you were to go into any business, you were to take over any business that wasn't doing well, and you had to establish the culture that you wanted. What's the first couple of things that you would do or install, or, what's the first couple of things you would do to start creating a culture that you want for that place to be successful?
Well, I'll tell you what I did at Starbucks when I first joined Starbucks, and I still believe in it today. That I just went around the company and I talked to everybody in the company. I went around, I talked to the baristas, I talked to the store manager, district managers, and I asked 3 questions. What do you like about Starbucks? What don't you like about Starbucks? What would you change about Starbucks? And after I talked to a couple hundred people, and they gave me their opinion, I put it all together and I went back to the people and I said, here's what you told me. Do you still agree with what you told me? And they agreed. And I said, okay, we're going to do what you think we should do. And we're going to move the organization forward based on your beliefs and your thoughts and your ideas. And that's exactly what I did. And that began the journey of people being able to trust me, because I asked, but then I followed up. You can't just go ask and not do anything. You got to listen to your people. They know the answers. You don't have to. I never was the answer guy. I was always the question guy. People would give me the answers. I was the alchemist. I took the disparate ideas and put them together and made it work. And when you do that, you build trust. And trust makes the world go round. Without trust, there are no healthy families, there are no healthy relationships, there are no healthy businesses, there are no healthy football teams, right? You got to have trust. The people have to trust that you're looking out for them, and you have to trust them until they prove they're not worthy of trust.
Wow. I love that. And I think, tell me what you think about this. Like, you build trust, through relationships, through honesty, through lots of things. And I've often thought this, like, I give people trust, and I allow, but I am trustworthy, and I'm going to give it to them, and it's theirs to break,
Yeah.
earn, or keep. But I mean, I think we should give it and think that, most people have a lot of good inside of them.
You give trust before you get trust. You give love before you get love.
Amen.
And those things, they work. And until somebody proves that it's not appropriate. And that doesn't make them a bad human being, but it makes for a conversation, right?
No
And
doubt.
after twice, it's for one, shame on me, twice, shame on you.
Right.
So yeah.
One thing I've learned from that, and I will take our seniors every once in a while and bring them in and set them down and just say, "Hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Like, what do you like? What do you not like? Like if we have to, we want them to take ownership. We want to be a player-led team. Like, I do think you have to ask them, what do you like? What do you don't like? What would you change? Is there anything I can do to help you? And that one of my favorite quotes in the book, and I've heard you say this, is the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
That means you hire people, you recruit great players, right? Give them a chance to show them. Doesn't mean you don't coach them, or you don't set out expectations, or you don't talk about what their goals are and what the goals of the organization are, but you give them room to show themselves.
sure.
Yeah.
And you give them room to fail, like you give them
Give
room
them
to
a fail.
succeed,
Yeah, exactly.
and not be overly critical.
Yeah.
Because I found this, like with kids, if they're afraid to make a mistake, they hold themselves back.
Yeah, exactly. They do, because they don't want they know what happens when they made a mistake at home, right?
No doubt.
They don't
No
want
doubt.
that experience again. And
No
people
doubt.
want to do the right things. In all my years, and I've been leading organizations for over 60 years, I've hardly, on one hand, could count the people that were self-destructive,
No
right?
doubt.
The thousands and thousands of people. People want to perform. People want to do a good job. They just need your help sometimes.
No doubt. And that's why they call you leader. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that
Yeah,
is our
exactly.
job as a leader. Let me ask you this. Some of the best leaders, that you've ever been around,
Yeah.
what were some of the commonalities, as far as characteristics or behavior traits that they shared?
I've been around a lot of entrepreneurs, and the one word I would describe every entrepreneur, they were persistent.
Mm,
They didn't give up on their people. They didn't give up on their goals. They kept driving until they, in their own mind, they said, okay, I'm going the wrong direction. I'm going to tilt to the right. But they stayed with it. They stayed with it, and they stayed with their people. And when you have belief, the magic of believing, so to speak, amazing how it makes it happen. I mean, look at Colorado. Yeah, football team goes from not winning a game, basically, or winning one game. It's basically what he's done is bring the magic of believing.
no doubt.
That's what he's done. He said, I believe in you. I hope you believe in me.
A human that believes in a cause
Yeah.
can do amazing things.
Amazing things.
There's
Exactly.
no doubt about that. Well, tell me this: how Starbucks has turned itself into a household name, which obviously there was a time when it was not. My first question is: were you a coffee drinker before you joined Starbucks? Like, did you enjoy coffee just as a?
Oh, I loved coffee. I was a customer of Starbucks for 17 years before I joined. They never sold a coffee by the cup. They sold coffee by the pound and equipment to make coffee. So I used to have mail order coffee sent to my home from Starbucks. Yeah,
Wow.
so I was an avid coffee drinker before.
Yes, I don't know that probably since the time I've been 21 or 22 years old, so I'm 50, I think I'm 52. I have spent 30 years every single morning of my life with coffee. Like
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
relationship that I will not do without. You know what I mean?
that's
Like,
me too. I go to bed at night sometimes thinking about what coffee I'm going to have in the morning.
all
Crazy.
right.
My wife thinks I'm nuts. My wife drinks Pepsi. She doesn't drink coffee.
Oh my gosh. Well, my wife was a Diet Coke drinker, and she broke that habit. And she doesn't drink coffee, but she does not know what she's missing. Like,
Yeah.
she's going to miss out on a lot of great stuff. Well, how does, what's a couple of things, without going into great detail, how do you go from 28 stores to 15,000? You know, like what were a couple of the moments or, you know, things that had to happen to scale it like that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to have great people. You got to have people, and then you got to let them choose the broom. So that is the minute you go, you hire one person, you're no longer in the coffee business. Now you're in the people business. And so we were in the people business. So you hire great people. Then you got to give them leeway to go out and do it, but you've got to talk about what the goals are and what our greater purpose is. Then you have to get the resources in place. You got to have good equipment, right? You got to have the resources, the money to buy the equipment. You got to have in our business you had to have get good real estate. You had right, and you had to do it all. It was always in the details, and then you had to listen to your customers
Mm,
and to listen to your people that and they guide you, and then you got to get out of the way.
mm,
That was the biggest thing. I first realized that we had something big when in Vancouver, British Columbia, we had a store on one corner, and that it had a demolition clause in the lease, which means that the owner could kick you out at any time if they wanted to tear the building down. So it was our best store. I was concerned about that. So I said to our real estate person, see if we can get the store kitty corner across the street. Well, I thought it'd take a year or so to get it. Well, she came back in 6 months and we had it. Now I had to make a decision. And what am I going to do? Do I open that store? What could happen to the first store? And I said, okay, let's open the second store. And the worst thing that could happen is we'll sublease the first one. So we opened the second store and we doubled the volume on the corner.
wow.
That's when I knew that we had something big. And from then on, you could see we put a lot of stores very close together, and it worked. And so it was those things. But primarily, people asked me, "Well, you must have had great training programs." We didn't. What we had were great expectations,
Wow.
right? We had big beliefs, and we created trust, and that's what made it work. Now there are a lot of details, there's a lot of blocking and tackling,
Sure.
and there's a lot of X's and O's, but that's not what makes it go.
Well, that's, I was sitting here thinking as you did that, like I retired from the state of Mississippi, moved to Nixon, Missouri, 3.5 years ago. And, one of the first things, that I had to do, get the right people on the team, set goals, get the
Yeah,
resources to be successful, set a high expectation, like number one, I have to believe so that everybody else believes, and then let the belief buy in, and then trust people to do their jobs, so it doesn't, whether you are building a football program or putting together, a store, to me, it takes what it
exactly,
takes.
exactly,
It takes what it takes.
exactly. Yeah,
Well,
whether
let me
you're
ask
building,
you this.
they're building a family.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
It's the
Amen.
same. It's the same, and we think it isn't, but it's the same.
No doubt. Well, we go as far as, and I'm sure some of this is in place, but like with our program, we're going to have a vision. We're going to have a mission statement. We're going to have core values that we try to live by. Like we're going to set standards, and it's the same thing with a family. It's the same thing with a business. And, that is awesome. Let me ask you this, you know, you said we listened, like, and I know this is silly. How did you listen? Like, what do you mean listen? Like we listened to, like, how did we listen?
You ask good questions and you listen for the answer. And then you not only listen with your ears, you listen with your eyes, and you listen
Mm,
with those little antenna that we have inside of our head. We don't recognize that they're there. But the way I would relate that to people is if you come home at night and you walk into the house, you don't have to ask your wife, how was your day? You know how our day was. She didn't
amen.
have to say a word. Why? Because you're watching, and those little antennae you have inside your head. It's the same thing with your players. You know when they're smoking you. You know when they give you an answer that they don't believe because they think it's the answer that you want. And you have to dig. I used to say to people, look, don't tell me what you think you want me to hear. Tell me what you think I don't want to hear. Tell me what's underneath all of that. Give me the why, not just the what. and you have to dig it. That's the only way.
Yeah, you know, I can come in and I know exactly what type of hug I need to give my wife because of what type of day she had,
Yeah,
like
right.
that is
Yeah,
such a great example, because body language matters so much.
yeah,
Let me ask you this, you know, in the growth, in anything,
yeah,
adversity.
yeah.
So give me an example of some adversity that you ran into, building, the business or whatever, and how did you handle it?
Well, the biggest thing when I started Starbucks International, which I became the founding president of Starbucks International, it was the adversity that I created for myself. Right? We were opening first in Japan, and in Japan, there's a lot of unwritten rules about businesses, and I started pushing back against all those. I said, "This is stupid. Why are they doing that?" Da 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 da. You know, and uh, until one of my direct reports came to me and said, "Howard, there's an old Chinese quote, and it went like this: Big noise on stairs, nothing coming down." He said, "Get over yourself.
Mm,
You know, we need to be the best at living up to the unwritten rules." And he was so right. And I let go. I said, okay, we're going to be better than any Japanese company at living up to the unwritten rules. And that's what we did. So I created my own adversity. And that's typically what happens.
sure.
We put our own rocks in the middle of the river, and then we hit them. And so it's that kind of that's where most adversity comes from. It isn't the stuff from the outside; it's the stuff that's in our head.
Internal
Yeah.
versus external. Like a lot of it is internal.
A lot of it is internal, and sometimes it's external.
Sure.
But you got to be persistent. You got to work around it. But it's that kind of thing.
Well, something you shared last time that I thought was interesting, and you may remember this, you may not, but you talked about a wages mistake. Where like you
When I first
increased
came,
wages.
yeah, I
Tell tell me about that.
Yeah. So I got there and it was early on and we were paying minimum wage. And I thought we can't recruit good baristas at minimum wage. So I wanted to raise wages and we laid out a plan for doing it. And we had to be at least $1 an hour over minimum wage all the time. And we ended up being more than that most time. So we put the plan in place and we rolled it out and I went on vacation. And went on vacation. And I get this call about the middle of my vacation, and my head of finance said, "We got a problem." We had projected that our raises were going to cost us 1% of sales. Instead of that, they cost us 2% of sales. That
Hmm,
was significant. We were a company losing money at that time.
sure.
I said, "Well, what happened?" So I said to my wife, "Honey, I got to go back." So I went back and we had to figure out what we'd done wrong. And we just had blown it. We had blown the planning and blown the number. But I said, we can't go back. We've already given, so I've got to fix it. And I had to figure out what to do to fix it. And we had to raise prices a little bit, cut costs in some other areas, but we fixed it and we stayed with it because in my mind, a deal is a deal.
Sure.
Make a commitment, that's the commitment. And so that's what we did. But boy, I thought I was going to get fired over that. You know, that was early on. I thought Schultz was going to kick my rear end. And he did a little bit, but I fixed it and we went on.
Sure. Well, but what you also did was, you built trust with the employees because you didn't take it back, and you figured it out. And what are we supposed to do
And I
when?
didn't blame anybody. I took the responsibility. I mean, the truth is it was my head of finance that had made a numerical mistake. And when Howard came and said, "Well, who did this?" I said, "Me. I did this."
Well, Howard, that is in today's society, that is very uncommon.
Yeah.
What's common is to throw people under the bus, to try to make yourself look better. And that's not the way to the top. Okay, I got a word for you. I need you to help me with. In the book, and it's not about the coffee. I mean, I love it. I think it's fitting for anything. It's fitting for our football team. It's fitting, but there is a word that's used, and I'm a big word guy. I love words, man. I got a list of words in my phone every time I hear one, and I got this word in there, but I'm confused on what it means, and I'm hoping you can help me. Compassionate empathy.
It's compassionate emptiness.
Compassionate emptiness. Yes, I wrote down the wrong word. Compassionate emptiness. Like what?
So
I got
let me
compassion and I get empty.
So I don't know if you're a guy like me, but typical guys, we're born to solve problems. We're hunters, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
our when there's a problem, boom, I'm gonna get in there, give me the wrench, give me the screw, I'm solving this problem, right? So, I'd come home, my wife would tell me about her day, and I'd immediately go into problem solving mode.
Sure.
Well, why didn't you do this? You could have done that. Da, da, da. And she used to get so mad at me. And I couldn't figure out what it was until finally I realized she didn't want my opinion. She wanted my ears. She wanted me to listen and shut up. You know, so and I found that out with my kids too. They didn't want my solutions. They wanted me to listen to them. So I was reading this book one day, and here was that quote: "Compassion and emptiness." Says, what the hell does that mean? So I started reading further up. And basically, what it is this: full of compassion but empty of solutions. Right?
Yep.
Listen, but don't try to solve the problem for them. And once I began to do that, the relationship changed. Because now instead of giving her advice, I'd say, well, how did you feel about that? And, or what can I do to help? Is there anything I can do to help you? Most of the time it was no. I need to solve this myself. And that was the same with the kids. So that's where it came from, compassion and emptiness. And I have lived by that. I have it on my office wall, compassion and emptiness.
Howard, we might have saved some marriages today.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? Because I can promise you this. I have heard my wife say, you don't have to have an answer for everything.
Yeah.
Like I'm not telling you for an answer. I'm not telling you to solve, like you don't know everything, so
Yeah.
I have heard that. And I think great advice is this, ask questions, like shut up and listen, like shut up and listen, just listen.
Yeah.
But then when you do respond, ask a question, like I love that. And I think that is I think that's a great word that I'm gonna add to my phone, and I'm actually now gonna know what it means. All right, this does not surprise me, but I know this is true. You also had a habit or a hobby or whatever you want to call it of writing birthday cards and anniversary cards. Okay, now you're gonna blow some people's mind because I know this, and I still try to write handwritten notes. I try to, I'm not very good at it. Okay. But I try. I've got and I write them. And I have in this podcast time, I interviewed not long ago one Sherry Cole. Sherry Cole was the head basketball coach at the University of Oklahoma women's program. She's a Hall of Fame coach. She graces me with being on the podcast, and then she sends me a thank you card. And I'm blown away. I'm like, some people are just different. Tell me about your hobby, your habit, your whatever of writing birthday cards, anniversary cards to employees.
Yeah, well, I'm not so good at it anymore. I got to tell you, I've so sucked into the use of the internet. But
Sure.
when I was working at Starbucks, I would send every partner, up until we had 10,000 people, a birthday card and a company anniversary card. And I would write everyone, I would handwrite a note in everyone. Now, most of the people I didn't know, but that was important. You know what I've learned? We get too caught up. We think we have to write something brilliant. No, we don't. You could just write thinking of you, a happy birthday. John, thinking of you, happy birthday. And I got to tell you the strangest thing that I've been retired for 13 years. And people still have kept those birthday and anniversary cards. You know how many people never get a birthday card from anybody? They never get an acknowledgement. They've worked in a company for 25 years. Nobody ever says, hey, thank you for 25 years. And so that was a habit I learned from somebody else. And I picked it up and I just started doing it, and it made a difference. I used to take boxes of cards on airplane flights with me, and I'd write the card, I'd put them in a FedEx envelope, send them back to my administrative assistant. She'd put them in the file when to send them out.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I no longer could do it, I transferred it, handed it off to the people in the organization. But it's
Sure.
amazing when it does.
Well, I know, as being the recipient of, some cards from people that I would not have thought, I mean, it makes a big difference. Like, I can't tell you exactly what Sherry Cole's card said, but I will never forget the fact that she wrote down and she sat down and wrote a card to me. Like, it is different. And I try to do that for people in my life. Now I was never writing as many as you were writing. I'm not, I can't do that. But this is a question this is a question that leads me from what you're talking about. Many people struggle with work-life balance. Like, what advice could you give someone who's looking for a healthy balance between their professional and their personal life?
Get over it. It's not about balance, it's about integration.
Mm,
It's we live one life, and we want to live a fulfilling life. And fulfillment is not just happiness, it's not just joy. Fulfillment is also disappointment, it's also failure, it's success, it's pain, it's suffering, it's sorrow, it's all sorts of things. And so life is about integration, how you bring all facets of your life together. And now there are, times when you spend more time at home with your kids than you're going to spend at work. That's okay. If you're after this perfection, an ice skater is constantly always out of balance. The best ice skater in the world is always a little bit out of balance, right? Tipping back and forth on that blade. And so try to integrate your life. I used to take my kids on business trips with me so they would learn what I did. And so when I'd come home, they'd say, how was your meeting today? Or how was your meeting with so and so? And we would talk about it, because they knew what I was doing. So when I was gone a lot, but I never. Now, when I was with them, I was with them. When was at work, I was at work. But I think, when your child calls, it's the middle of the day, you're in a meeting, pick up the damn phone.
right.
Yeah.
I'm with you. And I've noticed in this profession I've been in for 30 years that the coaching can, just like anything else, can be very busy, but the families that are involved in the coach's life, when the wife comes around, the kids come around, they hang out at the field house, a lot of times those are going to be the ones that do have the best relationships, and it turns out the best. They are involved in their life.
They're involved. Yeah, you have them involved, and you're involved in theirs too. There's no balance. It's
Sure.
everybody wants it. Everybody wants this perfection. It doesn't exist.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
All right. I got two questions. I got two friends that we have a couple of friends. We call ourselves a little inner circle, where we help each other grow. And I asked them for a question, and this was one of them. His name's Chance Potts. This is the question: as you were growing yourself in your career and eventually Starbucks, what character trait did you possess that helped you grow to that level of success? And on the other side, what personal character trait was challenged to change or grow that might have prevented you from growing?
I had a strong desire to serve other human beings. That seemed to come from, like you were talking about, from my family of origin
Sure.
stuff. And I believe that everybody is put on this earth to serve others, right? That's our sole purpose in life. Now, I don't care whether you're a doctor, lawyer, football coach, basketball coach, architect, barista. There's only one reason any of us are here. That's to serve other people. And when we figure out what that is and we attach to it, and it changes in our lives, but when we really attach to that, you don't burn out, you don't bore out, you may get tired, but you're always charged because you always know where you're headed. So the thing on the opposite side of that, because I didn't have a college degree, I had a tremendous amount of insecurity about myself. And it took me a long time to understand that I just learned a different way. And when I finally got over it, I realized that I had value. And instead of that insecurity driving me, the confidence that I had of the experience that I had helped me. So, it was those two things, the desire to serve others and the ability to get over my insecurity.
Do you think, like, because I see now with, I'm a ferocious reader. I read every day of my life, and I see a little bit of a trend in the business world, or, just in the sales world, in, some of these arenas where people are foregoing college and skipping the bill that comes with college and going to work, because you didn't have a college degree, but gosh, the experience you had, you would not have had either, like.
Exactly. So it's now I wish that I look back at my life and I said I could have worked harder towards that. And but okay, fine. That's part of life, and
Sure.
you don't get a repeat. Okay. So you don't get a repeat. Before we end today, I want to make sure I do something here. I always like to give people my cell phone number and my email address. So my cell phone number is 206-972-7776. And my email address is hb@howardbehar.com. And I will get back to anybody that has a question. It may take me a little while, but I promise everybody, if you contact me, I'll get back to you.
And this, our listeners don't know this, but the reason why Howard is actually here today is because I watched a podcast that he did with John O'Leary, who wrote the book On Fire, from St. Louis, Missouri, and he left his cell phone number and email, and I either called him or emailed him, and he got back to me. And I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. And one of the things that stand out to me in the book is always say yes. The answer is always yes, do more, say yes. And I thought that was awesome. I got one more question. Your business career spans over 50 years. What was it that you loved about work, and what was it that kept you energized on a daily basis?
Just what I said before. I love people and I love to serve. And I get up in the morning thinking, but I still do. My mission in life is to nurture and inspire the human spirit of myself first, and then for others every day. And that's how I live my life. And so that gets me charged up. When I'm down, I look for somebody to serve.
How do you do that today? In what avenues? In what avenues?
Doing this podcast. I do a lot of coaching. I'm working with a small company in Cleveland. I'm 79 years old. I'm not a kid anymore, but I love to help people. Wow. And I'm on a couple of small boards, and I used to be on a lot of boards, but not anymore. And I just, if somebody asks something of me, I'm going to try to help.
Okay, before we leave, and I want to honor your time. I know you're very busy. Before we leave, I would like for you to share a story or two, and I'm going to lead you into the first story. Big Jim, the Steelers fan, could you share that story? Because I think that kind of sums up Starbucks in general to me. Like why Starbucks blew up, why Starbucks is the premier coffee spot in the world, is it's a really cool story.
So Big Jim was a customer that lived across the street from one of our stores in Southern California. And he lived in a nursing home. He was in his 80s, and Big Jim was an ex-football player, and he was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, right? Every day he would come into the store, he'd order the same thing. He'd order a short drip coffee and a blueberry muffin. And they, after a while, because he would come in the afternoon, and sometimes we would run out of blueberry muffins, but after a while, the baristas would save a blueberry muffin for him. And every day for 2 years, Jim came in, and he wasn't a customer, he was a friend, of all the people working the stores. He loved the people, and the people loved him. Well, one day, Jim doesn't show up. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So everybody was wondering where Jim is. And so one of the baristas took the muffin and a cup of coffee across the street to the nursing home and walked up to the front desk and asked the receptionist, "Where's Jim today?" And she just looked up and a tear came down her face and she said, I hate to tell you this, but Jim passed away in his sleep last night. Well, it was devastating. That barista went back to the store and told everybody. Everybody was beside themselves. I mean, they lost a really good friend and a person that they really loved. Now, every time Jim came in and got that cup, the people would write something on the cup, like, Jim, we love you, Jim, the Steelers suck, or anything to make him laugh, or to make him cared about. And every time he did that, he got something on the cup or on the little bag with the muffin in it. So the day after Jim passed away, one of Jim's kids comes into the store and says to the store manager, I don't know if you know, but Jim loved you, loved all of you. And the funeral's tomorrow, and I was wondering if you could all show up. Well, we couldn't close the store, but the store manager found people to relieve everybody, and they all go to the mortuary where they're having a ceremony. And as they walk in the front door, there were two big tables, and on the tables were every bag and every cup that the people had written something on. Jim had saved every one of them. Nobody knew. They were just doing fun little things, caring about Jim and making him laugh or making him feel loved. And, it shows you in life, it's not all the things it's not the big things you do, it's the little things you do in life to help other people have a better life. And so, you got to care about the people and you got to do the things that help people care.
I think one of the things that stands out, with you and with Starbucks and the story and in the book is, man, it's about the people. It's about caring about people. It's about serving others. It's about putting them first, and that's pretty obvious. And that stands out to me greatly. All right, one more story, and I promise I'll let you go. And this one, you told this on the mastermind. There was a guy who asked you early on he wanted to set up a meeting with you and Howard Schultz. And you were trying to, I'll take care of this, but he was insistent on asking Howard Schultz. All right.
Yeah. So that's the story of Little Jim. And
yes.
Little Jim was a store manager for Starbucks. And I was there 3 months, and he'd called and said, I'd like to meet with Howard Schultz. Well, said, I can handle this. So I said, Jim, well, what is it? Maybe I can handle it for you. He said, no, I want to meet with both of you, but particularly Howard, because he'd been there. Howard, of course, had been there long before I was, and Jim had too. So I arranged the meeting, and Jim shows up at the front desk. I go get him, and we go back into Howard Schultz's office, and there's a love seat, and Jim and I sit, and Howard's on the phone, and he just says, hey, wait 1 minute, I'll be with you. And so finally Howard got off the phone, and Jim and Howard made some small talk because they knew each other. And I'm an A-type personality kind of. So I said, so Jim, what can we do for you? Well, I was kind of sorry I asked the question, because Jim looked at Howard and he looked at me, and I said, I need to tell you that I have AIDS and I'm dying. Now, this was early on in the AIDS epidemic. And we didn't know much about it, and I'm sitting right next to Jim and thinking, oh God, is this, is this about, what is this? So, I hate to admit it, I tried to slide over a little bit, but, and he said, and Howard said, well, Jim, what can we do for you? And Jim said, well, I'd like to work as long as I can work. And remember, we're in a food and beverage business. And this is a company that's losing money at the time. We're a small company. And Howard looked at him and said, Jim, you can work as long as you want to work. And when you can't work, we will pay your full salary, right? Until you pass away, until you're no longer with us. And, remember, we're a small company losing money. Howard didn't even blink. He just did it. And then Howard looked at him and said, how are you going to pay for your health care? Well, Jim said, there's a lot of hospices opening up now for people with AIDS. And so, I think we're going to get some help there. And Howard just looked at us and said, absolutely not. We will pay all your health care costs. Right now, Howard was a young CEO, but he didn't even blink on those things. Now you can imagine the message that sent to me. I can do anything to help another person. And we didn't do that for Jim. We paid his salary, we paid his healthcare costs. And what do you think that said to the rest of the company and the rest of the organization?
No doubt.
You can do anything you need to do for people. And so that's a big thing. It was two things: the little things to help people, the little notes on the paper, and the big things to make sure you're taking care of your people. So That's it.
Yeah, those are two outstanding stories, and I think sum up, what it's all about, And Howard, I appreciate you taking the time today. It has been a true blessing. I know that, everyone that listens is gonna, want to be a better human and want to serve other people from listening to this. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate you including me.
Well, and to all of our listeners, man, thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of it. We just want to try to add value to your life if it's possible. Until next time, adios amigos.